Hi, my name is Simon Hedley, known to my clients and partners as a strategic alchemist and an ultimate connector. I'm a chartered accountant who brings together and bridges the worlds of business philosophy, finance, marketing, optimization, ontology, and so much more. Always focused on one thing, the simple idea that can make the difference to people and projects so we can tip the scales in their favor and get them complete. Pause, Stop, Reset is all about the three little words that can make the difference. They have for me and my clients, and I hope they will for you too. During the show, you'll get to learn about my guests' real-life experiences and the insights and lessons they've learned as they've navigated the resets in their personal and business lives, which you'll be able to leverage yourself. So let's start the show. Hello, I'm Simon Hedley, and welcome to this episode of Pause, Stop, Reset. Today, my guest is Simon Alexander Ong, who is a coach, speaker, and the author of the new book, Energize, all about making the most of every moment. So Simon, welcome to the show.
Simon, thank you so much for having me on today.
And as we were just saying, it's nice to have a fellow Simon. Makes it much easier, right? Simon and Simon. It's a new TV show coming soon.
Indeed. It's a nice way to open a conversation, isn't it?
It is indeed. So for people that may not know you yet or haven't come up with your resets, who are you and what are you focused on today?
Sure. So when I grew up, Simon, I was always of this belief that success was defined by my job title. Be a banker, be a lawyer, be a doctor, be an accountant. And so I pursued the banking path. I graduated from the London School of Economics in 2007. And I started what was probably the worst possible time in a year before the global financial crisis at a company called Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into administration.
Oh.
And while it was scary at the time, as you can imagine, if you've ever gone through redundancy or you've lost your first job after graduation, in hindsight, it was a beautiful blessing in disguise because it kickstarted the journey to what I now get to do today, which is to work with those in leadership positions from the likes of C-level executives, entrepreneurs, TV presenters, and Michelin star chefs, speaking at some fantastic companies like Salesforce, Facebook, and Microsoft. And as you kindly shared just now, Simon, one of the positives from the COVID pandemic was landing a book deal with Penguin to write my first book, Energize.
What I love about this, Simon, this always happened on the shows. I thought I knew who you were, and our synergies and synchronicities are magical. I actually was working in banking myself. I was at ABN AMRO at the time, a bit older than you, I'm afraid. I have less hair than you as well. But no, it's really interesting. We actually had a project called Get Into Banking and one called Get Out of Banking. And it's a really fascinating bit how many people in the banking environment learn about energy. They learn about communication and resetting and all this stuff that if only we knew when we were like 19 and 20, right? It made all the difference, but we didn't learn it until you go through those experiences that lets you then help other people. So is your focus now on energy? Like if you like crux the energy of your mission, what's Simon's big mission at the moment? Like if you could share that, what's your biggest sort of focus as a mission these days?
I think if I were to sum it up in a very short sentence, Simon, I think my mission is simply to help people live a better story, and unlock the hero potential within us all. Because I think when we are able to do so, that is when we live in greater energetic flow and are able to savor the magic and beauty of life. Because many of us don't actually get to this point of being able to enjoy life in such a way. But I think when we do, that is when we understand what this gift is truly about. It's about being a person of value and doing something that gives us a place and purpose in the world.
I love that. And I've touched on it earlier. I've been doing Tai Chi Chuan since I was 15, 16. This idea of flow and energy is really quite fascinating. It's very, very Western and very Eastern and very misunderstood. Ontology as a whole concept behind Pause, Stop, Reset. And we joke, most human beings have no idea about the beingness of being a human. They get trapped in the doing, running around doing stuff because that's what you do. And that sort of is why we're here. And listening today, I have a sense there's some little nuggets coming that get some value for you during today's show to help you pause, stop, reset. And I want to get into the sort of the nuts and bolts of who you've been on your journey, your story so far, Simon. So if you look back on your life till now, What's been the biggest shifts and resets you've been through? Obviously, you mentioned the GFC, Lehman's crashing out, one of the big sort of nightmare experiences. But what are the biggest shifts and resets you've been through?
Sure. So when I look back, there have probably been a few pivotal moments, Simon. The first came in the second job I had. So after Lehman collapsed, I was fortunate enough to get a job in the hedge fund world. So I moved still within the world of finance, but now onto the trading side. And while on the outside, it sounded glamorous. Simon is working in a hedge fund, and it's the hedge fund that makes a lot of money. It's not in reality glamorous unless you are the senior portfolio manager, unless you are one of those who heads up the fund. If you're the junior of the team, you're essentially the T-boy for all the senior managers.
I love the honesty here. It's like, that's a T-boy. Yep, that's the job.
Yeah, you literally are the T-boy. I mean, when the managers need their lunch, you go out and grab their lunch. When they need something to be processed after they've made a trade on the fund, you go and sort that out. You are, in essence, the back office, the middle office, the operations. And I guess it wasn't around at the time, but you're also the Deliveroo for the team. And so I got to a point, Simon, in which I was physically and mentally exhausted and burnt out. So I was often in the office around 6 or 7 in the morning, and not out until sometimes 10 or 11 at night. And if there was a client event, then of course I wouldn't be back home until the early hours of the morning. And during this period of my life, I was just killing my health. I was surviving on little to no sleep, junk food and takeaways, and just not getting anything in the form of exercise. So the viewers can't see me now, but I was a lot bigger than I look now in terms of my size and weight. And there was a time in which I came back completely drunk at 3:30 in the morning. And my girlfriend at the time was seriously worried. And so we ended up having a heart-to-heart conversation the next day when I was in a more sober state, Simon. And she brought up some very harsh truths to me. And she brought to light that all of this stuff I was doing outside of work, the alcohol, the partying, the binge watching TV series on the weekends, it was a way to escape this reality that I was lost. I was clueless as to what I was doing because the crisis had really dented my future, really dented what I had imagined my career was going to be like. And so the first thing I had to address was my physical health. And so I stayed within the world of finance, but I decided to get a job within the financial industry that would be more 9 to 5, so that it would give me the time to prioritize my health first. And second, to really understand what I wanted to do long term, which is something I never really thought about. Because as I said earlier, I mean, I grew up with the understanding that success was driven by money, and success therefore would be determined by my job title of being a banker, a doctor, lawyer, accountant. So I never knew much else beyond that. And so having the space to pause, to reset, and to ask myself, what did success mean to me? It made me understand, Simon, that many of us are exhausted, not because we're doing too much, but because we're running somebody else's race. We are measuring our progress against metrics determined by other people. And until we take ownership of our definitions of success, fulfillment, and impact, we're always going to feel drained and exhausted.
Understood, 100%. And again, we have much more to talk about, you and I, over time. And it's ironic because a lot of these lessons go back to the Romans, the ancient Greeks, their classical texts. And yet, I think every generation has to learn this the hard way. There are kids today who are spending their entire time on TikTok and YouTube, and it's nothing wrong with that. And Minecraft, crafting to mine, mining to craft. And you do sort of go, what's the point? But sadly, I'm really glad you, again, hopefully it's the right way. I'm glad you had that positive girlfriend experience at 3 a.m. going, let's have a chat. That there's people who've been on the shows before, their version of that is they collapse on the escalator at King's Cross. They have that physical stop that goes, we need to stop you now if you reset. I get a sense you've been a driver, an alpha male to go into the banking space in the hedge fund world and get that stuff done. There's a drive to you, even getting the book deal done so casually, as you say. By the way, if you haven't read the book yet, it's great. And the reviews that Simon's got are tremendous as well. So I'm just curious, do you find of the three, pausing, stopping, and resetting, which has been the hardest for you, and why do you think that is?
It's interesting because I would say it's probably a bit of pause and reset, and I'll share why. You mentioned something just now, Simon, about there's a drive to me, and I think part of that drive comes from the fact that I lost my mum at the age of 17. So she had an unfortunate accident. She slipped into a coma, and just a few days later, there was no hope of her returning to life. And so, just short of her hitting her 50th birthday, we were arranging her funeral. And so, for me, that touches on the idea of reset. It literally reset my life to have to imagine a world in which my mum was no longer with me. But it also gave me a drive. It showed me very unexpectedly the fragility of life, the fact that we don't really have long on this planet. And the two words that stuck with me from that loss were don't wait. Don't wait. And it drove me to take action, however small, to just take some action, because clarity and confidence can only come from taking action. We don't get shown the whole map ahead of time. The map unravels as we take small micro steps forward. And then I guess the pause, the reason that has been quite challenging for me is because I believe that the more ambitious we are, it becomes harder to pause, because many of us have grown up, including myself, in a society in which we mistakenly think that to be productive, we've always got to be doing. And if I'm not doing something, then I'm lazy, or I'm not working hard enough. And so that, for me, in the early parts of my career, and also in the beginning of my journey as an entrepreneur, has been particularly challenging. I mean, it's a lot easier now because I'm aware of it. And being a parent, you have to pause a lot more, because when your child demands attention, you have to stop everything else. But I would say pause and reset in different ways, Simon, have had their impact on my journey.
And I love how, just for you, Simon, but also if you're listening in, your self-awareness, Simon, comes across. And that's part of the journey will go on as they get around this stuff. You mentioned children. Have you got 1 kid, 2 kids, 3? How many kids have you got today, and how old are they?
Sure. So my wife and I have got 1 child, and she just turned 2 recently.
Exciting. And in one of those reset moments, the dad mode kicks in, right? And it's not what you expected.
Definitely. The reset moments are literally reminders of how important it is to be engaged in the present. I think until you become a parent, we can easily forget that the now is all we have, and the now is where the magic of connection occurs. And I think when you're a parent, you get reminded of that, because your child is literally living in the moment, and he or she brings you into the moment when you spend quality time with them.
Very true. And as you were talking, I was reminded of one of those things from Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai. You must live like this is your last day, and live like you're going to live for 1,000 years.
Definitely. I don't know if you've watched the Netflix documentary, Simon, The Last Dance, chronicling Michael Jordan's career with the Chicago Bulls.
I've seen bits of it, but not the whole thing through yet, sadly.
Interesting, because there was a moment in one of the episodes in which the interviewer asks one of Michael Jordan's coaches, what do you feel was the differentiator between Michael Jordan and other basketball players at the time? And he responded to the interviewer by saying, it wasn't because Michael was the tallest or the hardest worker in the room, because all of those things are a bit of a given. I mean, you've got to be naturally tall to do well in basketball, and you've got to work hard to make the first team of a basketball team there.
Yeah, to be in the NBA. Yeah.
In the NBA. But what Michael had was his ability to live in the present. He didn't care what happened with his last shot. He wasn't focused on the next shot. He was only focused on this shot in the moment. And he said that made Michael a mystic. People would travel to ashrams in India to try and discover presence, yet Michael had it on the court. And that's what made the difference.
100%. And that's the reset bit. It's very easy to get caught up in your head. You and I in the trading world, right? Let's make it relevant for our backgrounds. A trader made $1 million yesterday. It's easy to get cocky. They lose $1 million. Easy to be depressed. And that having that mindset there again and again to get back here, back here, back here. Now the catch is I think it's wise. There's this duality to life, right? It's good to make assumptions. It's good to have expectations. It's good to learn, to have, this understanding of things that could go on while being fully present. And it's this strange dance, I find. You're going to be at the London Book Fair tomorrow doing a talk, right? And in that moment, anybody could walk in. The bit that goes, sorry, don't interrupt me. Well, that's great, unless it's the ideal person you'd love to meet coming on stage to talk to you. So navigating that is a really fascinating bit. I think a lot of it also comes, if you think about how far we've come as individuals and society. I can hear, especially with the background you've been through and the sort of synergies there with what I've been through, I sense. It's hard to remember how you were when you were 18 or 15. And some of these experiential shifts, that you don't forget them. I lost my father when I was 2. I've had a great stepfather, my dad as well now around, and my mum caught polio when she was 3 or 4. So that sort of fragility of life, while also seemingly at times, I know you got some martial arts with you as well, Simon, there's sort of the invincible, physical, immortal warrior state, right? Like, I can fight forever, carry on training. And it is this fascinating thing, coupled with, and it enters the ambitious world, right? So we live at a time recently, I'm sure you've seen Elon, Mr. Musk, Lord Musk, if you want to call him that. He's gone and become, pick your title. He's now a major shareholder in Twitter and on the Twitter board, right? How Elon's become Elon isn't a path others can really follow, in my view. The same way with Gary Vee, the same way with Richard Branson. Most of the people who are, even Oprah, the way they got where they got was very much, I think, being present, this sort of slightly mystical quality, I call strategic alchemy, those bits you couldn't quite make up, but when they're there, they're sublime. And we'll get into that a bit more. So we're looping around a little bit because it's fun to do that, I find. And with that, we're going to pause, start, reset. Unless you want anything to add before we move on. Anything you want to add at this point?
Not all, Simon, just to say I'm really enjoying the conversation so far.
Well, that's a good start, because a conversation can change your life. One question, one moment of pausing. And especially you've got the young child, Simon, you're going to have a point where, and it's my post today about this actually, there's times when you have to say something and times when actually biting your tongue and pausing for 10 seconds, the answer. As you get around more successful people, the hardest thing is to shut up and let them talk. Because they might spend 5 minutes thinking and you're like, but I'm bored, especially if you're quick. And I don't mean that in the wrong way, but it's sometimes those unexpected bits that where the juice comes. So I'm really curious, you've got your young daughter, and for yourself, if you could magic yourself and go back in time, what's the most important lesson you wish you could give your younger self, and why?
I think the most important lesson I will give myself, Simon, if I could go back in time, it's literally these few words. Listen to your heart. Listen to your heart. There is a reason why people say that the longest journey we make as humans are the inches from our heads to our hearts. And that is because very few of us actually give oxygen to what our heart is telling us. It may not always lead you to where you want to be, but it will always lead you to where you need to be. And so all those seasons that it leads you to, there are lessons in there if we have the humility to look for them.
Really interesting. I hadn't realized how much of a let's call it a modern day philosopher you were, Simon. No, it's a good thing. It's one of those bits. It's interesting. You sort of, at some level, it all becomes about philosophy, I find. And there are the coaches that it's very practical. It's like, so what are your approaches and accountability? And that's distinct from this sort of ontological coaching, this sort of shifting of ways of being. And it's quite fascinating. I think as I can see you, with the child and with the book, you're going to be doing more talks and more TV and more traveling, right? That's part of the plan. And at the same time, not getting caught up when somebody goes, hey, can we have a week off to go watch something? No, I'm busy. I've got a window in 6 years' time. It's like, that doesn't work either. Right?
No, I think part of my quality, and I guess it's also life experiences that have shaped me, Simon, is that I'm pretty grounded as a person. I'm not someone that will get caught up in all the, as you said, when I do more speaking, when I do more touring and TV and press. At the end of the day, I mean, I'm still Simon wearing a black t-shirt and jeans and can meet people for a drink at the local pub. So I think I'm not someone that will be easily changed because of that. If anything, I think it will give me fuel to do even more in the work that I do to serve and add value to the lives of others.
Love it. I'm going to give you one you might have already come across, which is true wealth is needing less, not having more. Have you heard that one in your travels?
I haven't heard that for a long time, but it does remind me of something I read years ago, Simon.
Yeah, and when you're hanging out in Hawaii on the beach, the Grand Wailea, just prepare some in costumes all you need. Very simple life at that point. If we're in the cold of London and the wet and cold of tomorrow. But we're going to carry on at this point. So I love reading books and watching movies. I'm curious what books or movies have most helped you pause, stop, reset, what have changed your life and how they've impacted you.
Sure. Well, for me, I'm just like you, Simon. I grew up loving film and cinema. So I'm going to share 2 films and 2 books actually that come to my mind. The first film that I really enjoy is Batman. And simply because when you compare Batman to other superheroes in the Marvel and DC comic universes, Batman is the one character that doesn't have a superpower. He has just this belief that there has to be justice in the world, and he is trying to fight for those who can't defend themselves. He's fighting for those who can't get the justice they want. So that's the first film that got me thinking about the fact that all of us have power within us. We have the ability to shape our reality and impact the world in very small ways, but actually very small and meaningful ways. The second film that taught me a lot as an analogy of life is the Christopher Nolan film Inception. And for those who haven't watched Inception, the basic premise is that Leonardo DiCaprio has to plant a seed in someone's mind that they own that decision. So by doing so, they have to infiltrate this particular individual's dreams and go dream within a dream within a dream, all the way down to plant that idea as if they own that decision when they wake up. And for me, that sums up a lot about life, because for us to make a major shift in identity to who we want to be, it begins with peeling away all of those layers one at a time to get to the core of who we truly are. Who is Simon? Who are you? And when you understand your current identity and the identity you want to be, then I think all your habits, choices, and behavior just flows from that point. And that's where we have to begin. It's to strip away those layers and start at the core of who you are. So those are the 2 films that have had the greatest impact on me in terms of getting me to pause and shift the way I saw myself and my world. In terms of books, the first that comes to my mind is one that I reread every year, actually, Simon. And that is The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann. It influenced heavily how I approach business and relationships, and the importance of being a giver and not a taker, because our worth is, as they would say in the book, our worth is determined by how much more we have given in value than we have taken in payment. And there's just so much nuggets and gold in that book. And if you're anything like me, you'll probably finish it in one night, because it's not a particularly long book, but it's very easy to read. And the second one it's actually 2 books, but it's part of the same title. It's called The Teachings of Billionaire Yen Zhu, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And the reason I like it is because it's written in a very unique style. It is written in bullet point format. So they begin each chapter with an Eastern parable or story, and then they extract the lessons in that particular chapter through the format of bullet points. So you can pick up the book from your shelf, flip through, and land on any page, and there will be some wisdom that may just be what you need to hear in that moment.
I love it. I haven't come across that last one. I love the surprise factor. Infinite Patience. Is that the book?
So the book is called The Teachings of Billionaire Yen Zhu by Colin Turner.
Lovely. Yeah. Infinite patience creates immediate results. So it's quite interesting. Again, I've been doing Tai Chi Chuan since I was 14. And these ideas of, I think, quite Taoist principles, very ironically, Knights Templar principles of being highly present and agile and capacity to get things done, understanding how to actually make an impact. I will give you a sort of seed to think about, which is what actually is valuable. And it's a really fascinating bit. You know, you're in the book industry now, Simon. You having 100,000 copies of your book in your garage is both a very useful asset and a problem, right? So this question of it's not that you have that problem at all, but there's a real challenge where it used to be, you know, having 100 hours of recordings was really valuable. Well, yeah, okay, but if I give you 1 million hours to listen to Tony Robbins, it doesn't really help you very much because there's too much to get through. And how do you navigate that? And what really helps tomorrow morning in a world that is changing really rapidly? We'll get hopefully a bit more of that as we go on. But I love those examples. And yes, I can see you as a fellow Batman in training. Excellent work. Simon, the secret billionaire, here we come. Oops, I revealed his secret. So you mentioned, obviously, I'm going to guess that maybe your mum passing was one of your most challenging moments of post-doc reset, something else. But I'm just curious, what helped you navigate those times that were really challenging for you, whether the Lehman's breakdown or other things? What helped you go through that process?
I would say more from the Lehman's. When my mum passed away, I think we have to keep in mind that this was a time in a world in which mental health was taboo. There were no resources. People didn't openly talk about mental health issues, not as much as they do now today, where it is a lot more mainstream and there's so many resources that you can find online. Back then, I just didn't want to talk about it with anybody, Simon, to be honest. I retreated into my own shell. You have to also keep in mind, I am Chinese and I was very stereotypically Chinese. I was introverted, I was shy. So I just happened to get even more introverted and shy. And it took me a couple of years before I could comfortably start talking about what happened. And I just didn't know how to deal with it. I just went into my shell. I just kind of got really quiet, focused on working hard, getting into university. And I don't think it was until the second, maybe the third year of university, until I just was open to sharing what happened and the fact that, you know, I didn't have a mum. So that, if I'm going to be honest, that was really tough. And there was just no way for me to deal with it at the time apart from soldiering on. And I just didn't want to share it with people because I knew that at that point in time, society was of the opinion that as a man, you just have to man up, carry on, you know, pick your feet up. And so there wasn't that capacity to understand the emotional side of such an experience. I think that by the time the Lehman Brothers collapse happened, and then following that, I was out of a job a number of times in the 8 to 10 years after the crisis. What helped me by that point was I was reading a lot of personal development books. So by that point, I was already working on my mind. I was elevating the energetic quality of my thinking. I was understanding that there was always a different way to see what was happening, that literally our thoughts were creating our reality moment to moment to moment. So I think by the time the crisis happened, I was in a lot better position mentally to deal with the challenges and setbacks that came with it.
I want to acknowledge a couple of things you said there. One of the challenges, especially in the UK, and are you a BBC or were you a Chinese born in the UK or born out of the UK?
Yeah, so I'm a BBC British born Chinese, as they say.
Yeah, I had friends that were very involved in that community, and it's this paradox of everybody's friendly, and yet you must be a strong man, especially in the Asian community. This idea of thick-faced black heart, keeping this very sort of I'm great, and don't upset face. And it happens in every environment. I'm here in the southeast of the UK. This is very much, how are things? Everything's wonderful. How are you? Which is, it's like, great. And equally, you and I know from, I'm sure, your backgrounds, just venting, complaining doesn't help either. One of the guests we had on, Terry, is an amazing grief recovery guy. If you're going through some grief challenges, listen to the Terry episode. And there are resources out there. And equally, a lot of the Western popular psychology on how to fix problems is actually quite destructive. And what I mean by that is there are people that are very well-meaning that have mainly had, I don't know, a couple of weeks of training And then being the coach, the therapist, whatever, that doesn't always help. So unless, I'm not going to go down too much in the rabbit hole. We've had people who are special forces soldiers we've worked with. The stuff they've dealt with isn't normal. It's like, how are you still breathing? Watching things happen when you're doing peacekeeping work and your friend gets blown up. These can be really challenging. And that bit about actually it is hard to reach out to say, I need help. And part of the paradox at the moment, we live in a world hyper-connected, right? Everybody's on Facebook and LinkedIn and we can all reach out. But everybody's still putting on that brave face, the mask. And it takes a lot to be really vulnerable. I still find that challenging myself. You want to be really open, but especially when you are in that sort of the coach advisor space, you don't always have someone you can go to where you can say, wow, my client's just dealing with this. This is really stressful because it's a different space. So the reason I'm sort of talking about that a little bit is if you are listening in and you're finding yourself going, I need some help, there are resources out there, find them in the portal, but also just be open for going and finding a book, finding a YouTube video and trusting yourself on that journey. And it is hard. One of my old clients, Jamie, talked about the dark night of the soul. I'm sure you've had some of those moments on your hero's journey. Is that true for you, Simon?
Definitely. And it's quite interesting you talk about vulnerability because I think it's such an important area, Simon. I had the opportunity to have a short conversation with Simon Sinek in New York back in 2017 before I was about to speak at Salesforce. And I said to Simon Sinek, if there's one tip that you could give those who are going into a leadership position on how they can be a good leader for those that they are responsible for, what would that be? And he shared with me 3 words. He said, ask for help. Ask for help. And what I took from that answer is that vulnerability does not make you any less of a leader. It simply makes you human and relatable. And that is often what staff and employees need to get behind the leader. Is to know that they're one of them.
Which is very hard, and everybody's trying to promote themselves and put themselves in the box, right? Again, I'm really valuing today's conversation. If you're listening in, just be open for reading some books, being on that journey. And it is a process, right? You don't wake up and click there. Our friend Kellen talks about that. You mentioned it. You don't really get clarity by being by yourself in theory. It's when you sort of start engaging with the world, you start to get certainty and clarity and confidence that builds up. And I love that you got to meet another Simon, by the way. Simon X at work, then 10, here we come. We've been working at this for a while. And it is really fun. And there are these resources out there, and trust your intuition. That's my advice on these journeys. So I really get that. And I get a sense that you've sort of built up your internal stuff and you've got people that you work with, and that keeps you alive as well, sort of your partner and your friend in that process.
Definitely. I mean, I think there's a saying that goes, we never get to the top alone. And that statement has been a fantastic summary of my journey because I'm saying to a lot of friends at the moment that when they get a copy of my book, even though my name is on the cover, the result of that book being in their hands is not just me. It's the result of my wife, my coaches, my mentors, my mastermind group, every single human that has influenced my life in some way and shaped me into the person I am has contributed to the making of that book. And so even though it bears my name on the front, it is the result of so many other people and the impact they've had on my life.
I need to have you meet Ken MacArthur at some point. You'll like Ken. You haven't already met him. His whole premise is you make an impact whether you mean to or not. And often, it's one of those bizarre things, you're going to make an impact but not by the way you expected. It might be the smile or that sort of the LinkedIn comment you made that for you was a throwaway thing, but it massively impacted somebody else in a way that you don't always realize. And we're going to get a bit more practical. For people listening in who are looking to make a shift for what's possible for them, what are your biggest suggestions for them? Simon, you've been around the block. You picked up some knowledge. I can tell this now. I know you're good. Give us your goodies. Give us the best stuff you've got.
Sure. Well, I think the very first thing that we can all do that will elevate not just your mood and energy, but will elevate the way that you see your world and what is possible for you is to be grateful with intent. And here is a great exercise to do to witness the effect on yourself. So the first thing is to take a moment right now to write down the name of one person that comes to mind who you can be most grateful for. So it could be a partner, a colleague, a family friend. It could be one of your children. Whoever comes to your mind first, jot the name of that person down now. The second step is to write down why did you choose that person in as much detail as you can. So thinking about the ways they helped you become who you are today. What would life be without them? In what ways have they shown up when you really needed them? And once you've written that down in this second step, the third step here is where the real magic happens. In the third step, I want you to drop that person a call and to read out everything that you wrote down in step 2. And just notice what you notice.
Brain's going, ooh, because like it's like the first bit's fun. The second bit's like hard work. They've got to call them. Oh, no. But it is about being vulnerable. And ironically, we call them acknowledgement conversations. Doing them really generally, not, and I won't mention his name. One of my friends goes, hey, Simon, I've been thinking about you. You're amazing. By the way, brought some money. It's like, it's usually a 20-minute voicemail. I love him dearly, but there's always like a thing coming. It's like, what do you want? Okay. But no, genuinely actually being present to it and allowing yourself to get those impacts are huge. Again, definitely. You've had some martial art teachers. Catherine Allen is one of those people for me. Sadly, she passed away 2 years ago now. And I'm endeavoring to keep her legacy alive. She was amazing. I wouldn't be me without her, and what's fascinating in the world we're in today, and sort of partly why we're doing these shows, Simon, is that the hidden secret behind why I brought you on today, there are these amazing wisdom keepers that you can't replicate. You've been through some stuff that you can't just read your book and click your fingers and be you. You have to go out the battle and do it, be the big-hearted warriors, taking on fights you're going to lose and everything else. It takes a lot to do that. And I really love that gratitude with intent. And you people that wrote Go Gratitude, I'm sure, are happy to hear you talking about that piece. And gratitude is such a vital piece of life that's so challenging in the modern world. You've obviously worked in London, I'm guessing in St. James's Park area in Green Park, around there in your hedge fund days.
Yes, I've been all over the place. I've worked in Canary Wharf. It's taken me to the West End, like in Mayfair, Green Park area. It's also taken me to the city. So I've kind of worked around the different locations over the years when I was in finance. Why
I'm bringing it up, how many people forget how far ahead they are. They haven't made enough to buy 2 Porsches this year. They haven't got X, Y, and Z, and they're miserable because they're chasing to get somewhere so that one day they can be successful and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, the health goes, the relationships goes, and that focusing on what's success and the gratitude makes all the difference with genuine to it. If you've got somewhere you can listen to this in a safe environment, you're already winning compared to our great ancestors. We're doing well. But it's also challenging when there's this ambition. We can do incredible things, and navigating that, I think, is really interesting. So one thing I'm curious about, I like to make things really simple. What's a takeaway you want somebody to go, you know what? I heard Simon say that. You mentioned Mr. Cynic. He's great about going, why? Just in a sentence, as Jim Rohn would do, book in a sentence. So what's the one takeaway you really want people to be left with when they talk to their friends tomorrow? What do they want to be left from meeting you today here, Simon?
If there's one message I could share with the listeners, is to get them to think about this question today. And that question is, how do I want to be remembered? How do I want to be remembered? And the reason I'm sharing that question, Simon, is because when I landed on that question, it was the culmination of a journey from focusing my energy on career virtues to focusing my energy on legacy virtues. And when you think about it, when you get to the end of your life, when somebody reads out your eulogy, they're not going to be talking about your career virtues, i.e., the company you worked for, how much you earn, your title, how quickly you got promoted, the awards you won. They're going to be talking about your legacy virtues, the impact that you had on the lives of other people, the story that you wrote about your own life, and how that has gone on to inspire countless others to unlock the hero potential within themselves. That is what people are going to be speaking about. So how do you want to be remembered?
Love it. I'm going to plus that with Terry's quote that still sticks with me, which is, your past does not dictate your future. Summarizing like how you got here doesn't alter where you go next. But it's a really interesting one and like perfect. I know there's a lot more to get into in future conversations, I'm sure, but this is the essence of Pause Stop Reset. And whatever it takes you to take off those masks, the old stories, and write your own story. And I'm guessing, Simon, your book's going to help them do that, right? I haven't actually read it whole in depth and detail yet through, but Energize is helping them find that meaning and help them create a story they'd love to build for their life. Is that right?
Definitely. I mean, in a nutshell, the book educates you on how, by understanding how to manage your energy from a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual perspective, you transform the way you live and work.
I love that. And I like to get, again, the juice out of people, as you can hopefully tell now. If they're listening, what's one thing without reading your book that they can do to start that process? My friend Alex Sharfin talks about drink more water and get more sleep, go walk 5 minutes in nature. What's one thing they can start to do to sort of help that process that works for everybody, if there is such a thing?
Sure. The very first thing you can do to start that process, take up the activity of journaling. Because here's a thought for you. Would you rather have cluttered mind or cluttered books? I know which I would rather have. And there's a reason why my friend Diana Chow said in her TED talk that writing is humanity distilled into ink. Writing is humanity distilled into ink. And the reason she shared that is because you can't have self-development without self-awareness, because you simply can't change what you're not aware of. True wisdom begins with understanding yourself first. And this is where the activity of writing and journaling comes in. Because the more you know yourself, the more you understand what the next step forward must be.
I'm smiling away because it's like we planned this. Like I built a journal 2 years ago, Pause Stop Reset journal. I'm joking, but half serious. But that's the whole thing. Journaling is such a vital task. Easy to do, easy not to do.
Yes, easy not to do. But I think that when we embrace it as a habit, what we come to realize is that it is literally the cheapest form of therapy. It is the cheapest form of therapy. It is you creating space to get to know yourself. It's as if you're pulling out a chair, sitting at a table, and having a silent conversation with your soul.
I love it. And again, we're getting some juice here. If you've got some value, do share these with your friends. Do engage with Simon. We'll get to how you can find him online in just a minute. I'm just curious on having been to this experience now, the experience, never the conversation about. If you think of any amazing guests that you get, our listeners would love to listen and also enjoy the process, please free to engage them with us. Maybe Dinah, maybe some of the people. So if you think of any amazing guests, you'd love to hear their answers to these questions, let us know that. That'd be okay?
Yep, sounds good.
Do you have any that pop into your head at the moment that you'd love to hear what they want to tell you about pausing, stopping, and resetting?
It's interesting because I think some of the guests that I would love to hear, the first one that came to my head obviously isn't with us anymore, but it would be Bruce Lee. I would think
Indeed.
His responses to some of the questions you've put to me today would be incredible to hear, Simon, because I think that while many people know him for his martial arts and the films he was in, for me, I was actually more of a fan of his philosophy, of his way of seeing the world and interpreting the psychology of humans in a way that was so simple to understand.
He was a true master at things that you touched on actually when you're saying, you can't shift things you don't know about. He was a master teacher and a master of himself. He's one of those people. I never met him. I've met people that studied him for decades. There's a certain aspect to the Michael Jordans, to people like him, that transcend in what they do. And unless you've done a decade plus of martial arts, I'm guessing, is that right? From what I know about your martial arts stuff.
I started karate when I was a young kid, and then I moved into taekwondo when I was at university, and then in my mid to late 20s did some Wing Chun.
So why I mention that is, having done 10 years plus of it, you see different things than you do when you first watch. There's a sort of understanding like that wasn't just good, that was like really good. And it isn't just because he can lift more weights. There is this quality of the philosophy, which I think comes back to, and it's a really interesting time we live in today, where, ancient philosophy wisdom from the ancient Greeks, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Chinese, ancient indigenous culture around the world is coming out. And as you said, when you were going through stuff 20 years ago, or whenever it was, and when was, you said when you were 17, 18, was like, how old are you now, Simon? Was that like 20 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, so I'm now 37.
You're a youngster. I'm 44, but like
we're not too far apart.
No, but at the same time, this stuff wasn't there. So actually now what is available for you and what is becoming available is so much more rich if you learn how to engage with that. And I really appreciate that. So look, let's get to the juice of it. People are going to go, how do I find out more about you, the Simon that's the author? How do they find you online? So what's the best way for them to connect and get more of your insights and wisdom? Apart from go buy the book at.
So indeed, Simon, apart from go buy the book, I am on all the major social media platforms, but the two that I am most active on, where you can find me if you wanted to reach out and ask questions, is on LinkedIn. So simply search Simon Alexander Ong and you will find me on LinkedIn, or on Instagram. And my handle on Instagram is at Simon Alexander O.
I love it. Keeping it nice and simple, which is really helpful, by the way. One of my top tips is keep things simple. Be your name online. It's easy to find you. And we'll have Simon in the portal so you can click through there as well. Look, I've really enjoyed talking. I appreciate we've gone a bit over time for you, Simon. And for you listening, you've done well listening in. Do, if you've got value, drop us a comment, drop us some feedback, and take action on what you're hearing. It's in the action invitation you're going to get some juice. I really love this reminder of carpe diem, not said that way, but being in the moment, having this gratitude with intent is so vital. And also this aspect of how do you want to be remembered? It's one of the most powerful questions, one of the key questions we talk about, but it's a really challenging one to be one. And it may be a thing to explore, to inquire in with your friends, with your partners, and just to be in the process and journal about. Before we drop, Simon, anything you want to add just to wrap up? And again, thank you so much for being with us today. I've really got value from it, and I hope you've enjoyed the process too.
Definitely. Well, first of all, Simon, it has been an absolute pleasure to be on your show today. And second, I just want to echo what you said, actually, which is, knowledge may be power, but the real magic lies in your ability to take action, because enthusiasm is common, execution is rare.
I love it. And we're going to see more of Simon in the future. Find out more about him at pause.reset.com/podcast. We'll see you next time. And whatever you're going through, remember, you can always pause.reset, especially when you don't think you can. We'll see you next time. Bye for now. Once again, I'm Simon Hedley. Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause Stop Reset, which is brought to you by the team at simonx.com and published by thesimpleidea.com. So you get maximum value and to access all the bonuses and gifts, make sure to head to pause.reset.com, register and explore the portal. And if you're looking for great people, check out onesmartnetwork.com. If you've enjoyed the show, do give us a positive review, subscribe, and share this episode with friends. I can't wait to share our next episode with you. Till then, remember, you can always choose to pause, stop, reset.